Hello everyone, Mason here. How are you doing? So, after years of anticipation, the moment has finally arrived. Amazon has released the first 2 episodes of The Rings of Power, and I'm here to talk about them. This is Hello Everyone, Episode 2, The Rings of Power. Trash or treasure? It's no secret that I'm a massive fan of The Lord of the Rings. I swear I mention it at least once every video. I love Middle-earth, and I could get lost in that world for hours. However, I wouldn't call myself a Tolkien purist, simply because I don't have the depth of knowledge required to call this show out on issues regarding canon. When it comes to major changes, yeah, I'll notice them, but minor inconsistencies probably aren't going to bother me all that much. At the end of the day, this is an adaptation, and due to a mixture of needing to make this show appeal to a wider audience, time constraints and rights issues, the showrunners literally can't get everything right. If you happen to have stumbled across this video and you have no idea who I am, hi, I'm Mason, and I sit on the fence so much that somebody should really build me a chair up there. We live in a world of extremes, and unfortunately I'm a simple, chilled out, middle of the road kind of guy. It's just who I am. I'm not going to make any apologies for that. Oh, who am I kidding? I'm British, of course I'm going to apologise. I'm sorry, I know I should have strong opinions, I just can't. I called this Trash or Treasure because, well, it's catchy, but it's really more of a yay or nay, maybe a thumbs up, thumbs down type deal. Basically, I'm going to share my thoughts on the show and sort everything into pros and cons, because ultimately it's a format that makes me decide one way or the other. Let's start where the show starts, with Galadriel, who's destined to become one of the most iconic characters in The Lord of the Rings, and also the character that instantly reveals my fence-sitting nature by going into both the pros and cons. Wow, that lasted 30 seconds, maybe less? I hate myself. Okay, first off, I like the concept of Galadriel and the driving motivation that she's been given. That desire for vengeance, and the need to prove that the great evil still exists at almost any cost when contrasted with the complacency of the elves, has lots of potential with plenty of room for exploration as the show progresses. It's a good through line that can tie everything together, and there's also some dramatic irony there because we know that evil hasn't been vanquished. This is a much younger Galadriel that's filled with anger and pride. I'm personally sold on following her character arc to see how she ends up as the wise lady of Lothlorien that we meet in the Third Age. It does help that I have a soft spot for the stubborn, hot-headed, determined hero. I don't know why, I just tend to like them. On the other hand, I'm not entirely happy with how she's being handled. There's a difference between having strong convictions and being suicidally impulsive. The decision that Galadriel makes at the end of the first episode felt frustratingly reckless. I was sitting there thinking, what are you doing, mate? What's your plan? Do you have a plan? No? Fine, okay, get on with it then. The seafaring antics that we get as a result of that decision are probably the biggest con, in my opinion. I'll say it how I see it. Galadriel and Halbrand being attacked by what audio description described as basically a bullworm from SpongeBob and trying to escape on a raft that literally only survives because the plot says it does was laughably stupid, and I felt like it was only there so the showrunners could give us an action set piece that demonstrated how hefty the budget is. If Galadriel had actually returned to Valinor, we could have seen the other elves enjoying everlasting peace, like me, at an all-you-can-eat buffet by myself. Meanwhile, Galadriel could be feeling the call of Middle-earth, have some sort of vision of the encroaching evil and decide to return. This could earn her the ban from Valinor that only gets lifted when she passes her test in The Lord of the Rings, and I feel like that would have been much more emotionally engaging. Oh yeah. I just mentioned it in passing, but despite my fears, Amazon did actually provide audio description, and that's a massive pro. On the other hand, so far, audio description hasn't read out subtitles, and that's an equally massive con. It's just ridiculously stupid. This is a fantasy world with races that are going to converse in their own tongues. If I'm going to be left out of that every single time it happens, then that's frustrating to say the least. Meanwhile, the hobbits, or I guess the half-foots if you want me to be more precise, are probably my biggest pro so far. Their introduction in episode 1, hiding away as big folk pass through their territory and then coming out once the coast is clear, just felt so hobbity and right. I'm fine with the fact they're being played as the light-hearted comedy relief. That's how it should be with hobbits in my opinion. They live their happy little lives and occasionally evil comes from the outside world to trouble them. That's just how it goes. I actually quite like Nori with her almost Tookish attitude. She obviously has a sense of mischief and feels the need for adventure. In my head, she could easily be an ancestor of Merry, Pippin or Frodo, and that's a nice thought, even if it does stay confined to my own headcanon. So far, when it comes to the half-foots, I don't have any complaints, although I can see potential problems in the future. The dwarves are definitely another pro. I'm not gonna lie, I was initially a bit annoyed that they weren't included in the first episode, but as my partner pointed out, Amazon released these first 2 installments together. They're essentially one long episode with a break in the middle, so I'll give them a pass on that one. I think it's undeniable that, as good as they are, in the Peter Jackson films, the dwarves get unfairly overlooked. For the most part, they get played for laughs, so in the Rings of Power it was nice to get to see Khazad-dûm, to get this insight into who the dwarves are as people, a brief glimpse into their culture and customs. I'm properly looking forward to seeing a deeper exploration of that as the series progresses. The Southlands as a setting is a tentative pro. It's weird though, because I think I'm mostly interested because this isn't an area of Middle-earth we've explored before. Knowing what we know about the future of this region, it's hard not to get invested. There's a few things that I quite liked. The first is the tension between the elves and men, caused by the fact that the elves are essentially occupying the region, keeping tabs on the men because they don't trust them due to the indiscretions of their ancestors. In my opinion, it draws this nice comparison regarding the nature of these two races. To the elves, the battles that they fought and the wrongs that were done to them are still fresh in their memories, but to the men, it was a long time ago. I can definitely see why, to the men, it would feel unfair to be branded as untrustworthy when the events that took place were long before their lifetimes. There's also an element of that dramatic irony again, because we know that in the War of the Ring, the people who live in the south help Sauron, but in a way, there's a self-fulfilling prophecy going on. The elves don't trust the men, and they don't hide it, which makes them so angry that when Sauron takes control, it will be much easier to convince them to work with him, thus proving to the elves that the men were untrustworthy. We've already been shown a few things that prove evil is reaching out with its grubby little fingers and it's getting ready to take hold of the region. I personally find that quite intriguing, so as a setting, I'm sold on the Southlands. However, so far the main character that we've got in the Southlands is Arondir, who's involved in a romance, and I'm not sold on either of those things, so there's 2 more cons. I just haven't been drawn in by Arondir yet. I don't feel that his personality is shining through, and that's a shame. Considering that this is the region where the proverbial poop is going to hit the fan and some very bad things are going to happen, we need a character we can invest in so that when those bad things do happen, they matter. I know a budding romance between an elf and a human, especially considering those contextual tensions, could potentially be amazing. On paper, I'm all for it, but I'm just not feeling the chemistry between the 2 characters, and the romance has no emotional weight to it because it feels like we've been dropped in during the middle of the story. There's a moment in episode 1 where Arondir is more or less professing his love and he says, "I've said it, in every way other than words." And I couldn't help thinking, well, use words then. If that line had come later in the series, after we've watched Arondir prove his love again and again without actually saying it, it would have been a nice moment, but instead it felt melodramatic. I would have much preferred to see the initial attraction and watch it blossom, rather than just being told, hey, these two characters love each other, and just being expected to accept that. We do get Theo though, and because I don't want to go too far into spoiler territory, all I'll say is, he seems like a troubled young man who really hates mice. Seriously though, there's some very interesting things going on with intriguing implications for later in the series. That sword. Oh yes, that gets my mind racing. So Theo goes into the pros. To me, the most confusing aspect of this entire thing is the stranger. Now I think the problem I'm having is removing the actual character from the rumour and speculation swirling around him, but on face value alone, I think I like what they've done with him so far. The fact that we have no idea what his allegiances or intentions are mean that whenever he's on screen, I feel like I need to pay attention and scrutinise every action he takes so I can work out what he's up to. There's definitely an air of mystery about him, and I have to admit that the demonstrations of his powers have led to some pretty nice visuals. I know that sounds stupid coming from a blind man, but audio description does provide me with enough details to visualise things in my head, and in my mind's eye what's going on looks pretty cool. The thing is, I'm just so nervous about him, guys. There's so many rumours floating around, and if he ends up being one of the blue wizards, I'm totally down for that. We don't know much about them, and I've always wanted to find out what they were up to. On the other hand, if he ends up being Sauron or Gandalf, my rage is going to be uncontainable. I don't think he will be Gandalf though. From the few contextual clues we've gotten so far, I would say the stranger is a bad guy, especially taking into account what I initially thought was a clunky throwaway line in episode 1. With hindsight, I still don't think that line was well written, but it is a good clue. All I'm saying is, pay attention to the fire. Sauron on the other hand? Yeah, he could be Sauron, but that seems a little bit obvious. Plus that's super problematic considering that he's not entirely sure what hobbits are in The Lord of the Rings. Am I getting that wrong though? Does he not know what they are, or does he just not know where they live? I can't remember, genuinely. Anyway, my point is, the stranger is probably my biggest concern with the show, but I can't judge him on what might happen in the future, so for now, I'll very cautiously put him in the pros. So, in the end, the pros win 7-5, and if you do the maths, that gives the show a score of about 59%. To be honest, that demonstrates how I feel about the Rings of Power pretty accurately. Could it have been better? Yeah, but it could have been much worse. I've got mixed feelings, but I'm leaning slightly more towards liking it. Wow, I actually made a decision. Just about. Question of the day. What story should never be adapted for the screen? Personally, I'd go with Bedding the Unicorn by Styx Hiscock. Yes, that's a real book by a real author, and that tells you everything you need to know as to why it should never be adapted. As a side note, if you want to know more about that story, there's a review of it over on Pax Panic, and I'll leave a link to it in the description, because let's be honest, you're kinda curious. Have you enjoyed this video? If so, the like and subscribe buttons are just sitting there, waiting to be pressed. Now press them, or I'll make you eat Play-Doh. Have you got thoughts to share? Maybe you just want to have a chat? Well, you know where the comment section is, and the link to my Twitter can be found in the description. Thanks ever so much for spending time with me today, guys. Until next time, take care. For now, I'm off, and you should have a good one.